Greetings, everyone. Welcome to my AA story. So, to set some boundaries here, some parameters, I will be telling my story at AA meeting length, which is generally 30 to 45 minutes. It's very hard to get this whole story in that period of time because I'm old. It was much easier back in the day. So, this what if you're not familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous? The AA story is it's a pretty powerful tool to keep people sober. Now, it's not. You might think there's a term in AA called war stories, which is everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous gets into the war stories. Back when I did all this crazy shit, I'm certainly going to cover like the big moments, but it's supposed to be where you were, how did you get here, and what are you doing now? Roughly, that's an AA story. So I'm not going to be participating in the chat, but you guys can chat away if you like, and we'll get this party started. Of course, I have this cleared with my sponsor. He actually suggested I do this a long time ago, and I had actually promised to do this at 10,000 subs and at 50,000 and 1,000, 100,000. I chickened out. I did it on my on Patreon. I've already done this on Patreon, so the patrons have heard this story. It's also a bit of hopefully, I don't know. I hope if somebody listens to this and gets some hope out of it, that would be great. That's the whole purpose of it, is to show that you can get out of the hole that addiction can place you in. Now, before I get started, we got to talk about the disease concept of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's something I had a hard time getting my head around for a long time. But the simplest way that I put it, people might agree, disagree, and that's fine. But the way I was able to work it out in my head is it's a disease after a conscious decision. I believe that addicts are born addicts, and I was born an addict. And there's a lot of signs, if you look back in my life, that show that. The best analogy that people use is when you went out trick-or-treating when you were a kid. I had to eat all my candy in one night. I had no self-control whatsoever. Born addict. So we will start at the beginning. I was born. We won't do that. I was born in San Diego, California, in a Booth Memorial Hospital, which wasn't really a hospital. It was a Salvation Army place for mothers who were giving birth out of wedlock, who didn't have a lot of money. It was the late 60s, 1969. That stuff was not looked on very well. And my mother was 16. So she gave birth to me, and her and my father had plans to keep me, but then my pappy took off because he was a teenager and wasn't ready for it. So my grandfather, who I've never met, who was a Seventh-day Adventist, talked my mom into putting me up for adoption, which was, the best move. She was 16. She wasn't prepared for that. That sent her off on her own journey that she had to work through, that we will not get into. But later on, I'll talk about having met her, and she is now part of my life, which is great, which is awesome. So I was adopted by a family who was cool. I had an older sister, mom and a dad. My dad came from the poorest of the poor. He lost his dad when he was 6. He had to help his mom, who was crippled, work on a farm with his brother. He had lost his younger brother had died. And he grew up in South Dakota. He grew up poor as dirt. He was a child of the Depression. So that's who I was raised by, as somebody who had no father, pulled himself out of complete poverty, joined the Navy, and became a very successful businessman. So, but not the most empathetic dude in the world, but that's okay. And before this really gets started, I wouldn't change anything. It might sound like a miserable life. I don't know. A life is a life. This is slice of life. So my mom never worked. She was a stay-at-home mom. She did jobs here and there, but she was basically a stay-at-home mom. And my mom had a lot of issues. I love her to death, but she had a lot of issues, and a lot I did not recognize until I was much older. Um, but was it my parents' fault? No, absolutely not. Again, I was born with addiction, and then certain circumstances happened in my life that helped lead me to the wonderful world of drugs and alcohol, and that is, of course, sarcastic. So I was adopted, they were good parents, lived in the suburbs in San Diego. It was a great place to grow up. Had friends, read comic books, rode my bike, played outside, things kids don't do. I know I'm going to sound like an old man. Got into comic books at a very early age, learned how to read from comic books. My first comic book was Marvel Team Up 42. And I'll never forget my first comic book. The first bad thing to happen to me was I won't get into details, but in elementary school, I was abused as a child. You can use your imagination on that. It wasn't beaten, and it wasn't by my parents. It was by a school teacher, which again is a issue for another day. You might remember a decade or so ago, a lot of people going after the Catholic Church for a lot of nasty things. And it's always confused me why elementary schools have always been never been called to task on that, because the same thing happened there. We'll just leave it at that. But what happened to me reprogrammed my brain to the point where I did not trust any adults ever, pretty much ever again, for my entire childhood, my entire adolescence. I was always looking out the side of my eye at an adult. There was always some creeper behind a corner. And the whole thing traumatized me. I ended up repeating that grade. It was second grade. Parents never knew, never told them. I was scared until later. I was completely scared out of my mind. That day, I had tried to walk home from school. I left the school and walked home, and a bus driver found me how old would I be in second grade? 6, 7, walking down the side of a highway in the middle of the day. And of course I got in trouble. So, but after that, things settled down, had a pretty decent life, played with my friends, was into sports, was into comic books. The other thing I was from birth was a nerd. Was in the Star Trek, Star Wars came along in 1977, changed my life. And I thrusted myself into nerddom. I was into comics, Star Wars, toys, all that stuff. Loved it to death. Listened to soundtracks all the time, to the point where it drove my sister and my family crazy. I was always playing with my Star Wars action figures. I would not leave my house without a Mego and a Star Wars action figure in my pocket. That's the way I was. And a comic book rolled up in the back pocket. Always rode my little BMX bike around. It was a pretty decent, played football outside. It was great. But there was always something a little wrong. When I was 8, I broke into my friend's house to steal a toy. That was probably the first sign of things. I got caught by the dad. My dad beat the shit out of me. It was stuff like that. The little signs. So never did really well in school, was basically a C student. I'd love to blame it all on not trusting teachers, but I was generally just, I also had like raging ADD, I guess. It was hard for me to pay attention. I was just always like a little spastic kid, always talked too much, and had a lot of problems. So when junior high rolled around, that's when I had, I started, it was around 7th, 8th grade. Girls became a thing, became an obsession just as much as comic books and toys, and really liked the girls, really did a lot. Was a bit of a jock in junior high. I played basketball, played football, played baseball, and was pretty popular in 8th grade. Yeah. But I started drinking. I was drinking and started drinking heavily in 8th grade. I had these little high C plastic bottles that I would pour out. And my sister always had booze and stuff. So I always stole from her or my parents and got drunk almost daily at lunch at school. Had my first hit of pot before that. It was, God, it was out of a little water bong at a boys and girls club when I was like 12. So, and I didn't like it very much, but I loved drinking. Drinking was great. I was drunk for every basketball game in 8th grade. I was stoned for every football game in high school. And that's when I started liking weed, was later on. And yeah, so high school, I held it together for the first couple of years, ditched a lot, got high a lot. But then I stopped being, I didn't like hanging out with the jocks anymore. And it was because of those, I like those punk rock girls for some reason back, when the blue hairs were cool, not like now. It's very sad now, but the girls with the blue mohawks and stuff, I like them a lot. So I got, started, my sister one day pulled an Almost Famous on me. It's almost the exact scene. I was listening to Empire Strikes Back one day, and she just brings in a pile of albums. She plants it on my bed, and she like ripped off the John Williams Empire Strikes Back soundtrack from my record. She's all, for fuck's sake, stop playing that shit and listen to this. And I listened to the Cars, the Police, and Oingo Boingo. And again, my life would change. I had a love affair with music, so much so I back when I was a teenager, I liked music as much as I like comics and toys. And I ended up working in record stores and stuff. So this is all pretty tame stuff. I was just, getting high, partying with my friends. And then I got in with what would be called a bad crowd, but I think that bad crowd would say that I infected the crowd, which I will not argue with. Started hanging out with all the Haitians, the metalheads, the punk rockers, getting high every day. I'll never forget the first time I dropped acid. My friend's sister. I'm going to try to keep names out of this. We're not going to be saying anybody's name or anything. This was probably around my last week. I had been kicked out of a high school, 2 high schools, and I was in a continuation school. This was my last ditch effort. This was later on in 10th grade. And my friend's sister said, stick out your tongue. I'm like, why? So I just did. And she popped some acid on my tongue, and I ate it because I didn't care. It was a drug. Woo. And she's all, have fun. And that was the day I had to do my behind the wheel driving test. So the first time I fried on acid, I did a behind the wheel driving test and passed, amazingly enough. And that was that. Shortly after that, the principal of that school had enough of me. And he pulled me in the office for like the umpteenth time and told me how I was not going to amount to anything. And I'm just wasting his time, and I'm wasting the students' time. And he said something, I can't remember exactly what he said, but basically I'm like the loserest of the losers. And I didn't like that. And so I popped him in the mouth, and that was it for me for high school. That was the end of my high school career, as bad as it was. So I started, I was not a very good kid at this point. I was getting high all the time. I was stealing money from my parents. So they had enough of me, and they booted me out. Now, a lot happened. I got to kind of breeze through this. So I was kicked out of my house when I was 16 and never really went back. A couple times, like dipped in, but never really went back. I had a friend who had if you guys know what the Crass House is in the UK, Crass is a band, and they had like this house where all these artists and punk rockers could just live in for free and crash out at. We had our version of that in Encinitas. This is all in Encinitas, California. My friend, his dad was a bartender and alcoholic. He was never around during the day. So that's where all the wayward kids and the runaways and the, people who are having problems with their parents ended up. And we just partied every single day. We had no money, no jobs. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. So this place became the place to go. And we did this for a couple of years. And we actually got ourselves together. We decided we need a purpose while we were getting high every day and, robbing and stealing, car hopping, all that stuff. And of course, skating, riding our bikes, going to shows, selling dope, and just pulling it off. And in suburban sunny Southern California, all of us hated the beach. None of us surfed. We didn't like surfers. We didn't like jocks. They didn't like us. Gotten a lot of scraps. There was a arcade back when we had arcades down by a movie theater. We all hung out there. They tried to keep us from hanging out there, and they just couldn't. But we decided we needed some purpose. So we started the Rocky Horror Picture Show at the La Paloma Theater, and we became rock stars overnight. Every Friday and Saturday night, we did a show, and it was just an excuse to party. We did the Rocky Horror Picture Show thing for a few years in the late 80s. And the partying just kept going on. But my addiction was just getting so much worse. While some people just knew how to not cross a line, there was no line I didn't want to cross. I saw a line, I stepped over it, jumped over it, leaped over it. But I was also the guy who supplied the drugs for everybody. And nobody really questioned how I got that stuff, but it was from a lot of criminal activity. So eventually, that criminal activity, eventually you're going to get caught. If you do something too many times, you're going to get caught. And the first time I got caught, it honestly wasn't my fault. I was driving my 1967 Oldsmobile, and I got pulled over because I had Batman handcuffs in my hanging from my rearview mirror. The cop was this little female cop named Officer Babcock. Officer Babcock. Her and I did not have a very good relationship. So she saw it was me, searched my car, and dickhead in the back seat had decided to bring his scale and all of his drugs with him and shove them under my seat and then say they were mine. So I went to jail. That was the first time I was in jail. My dad bailed me out, got me a lawyer. I had to sell my Oldsmobile to pay for the lawyer, and they got me off. Even though that guy to this day still said I did it. And believe me, at this point, if I did it, I would tell you. Because I did a lot of other things, but that one I did not do. But that was my first arrest, and I spent about a month in county jail before my dad decided to bail me out and he wanted me to learn a lesson first. And that was a lesson. So that was San Diego County Jail, not far from where Comic-Con is. It's on C Street. I'm sure it's still there. Okay. So then that wasn't enough to stop me, though. I got out and immediately started partying, and kind of wore it as a badge of honor. It's like, I went to county jail, yo, boop, I'm badass, I'm punk rock. And kept partying, started hanging out with, you kind of level up when you do enough drugs, or level down, however you want to put it. And eventually you make it to the source. And me and a friend of mine made it to the source. And you would think the source was a lot like Breaking Bad. That's why I didn't watch that show for a long time, because I lived it. So again, without naming names, the source worked for the government. He lived in a suburban house. It's somewhere in Southern California. And he worked for the federal government, and he was making meth, or crank at the time. It's not the meth of today. It was different back then. He was making it in his garage. He was also making acid. He was a chemist. And he, for some reason, and not in a creeper way, which I initially thought it was going to be, took us under his wing, and we started currying for him, being, little couriers. And that became quite profitable for a long time. Had a lot of fun, got a lot of free drugs, did some crazy, stupid shit like running it across the border. And then he got caught. So one day we were coming back, and there was a bunch of yellow jackets around his house. And we like dumbasses. We had a pile of money, and we're walking up to his house, and the yellow jacket sees us. And again, gift from the higher power on this one. He looks at us, he goes, you don't want to go in that house. You want to turn around and walk away. And we went, okay. So we turned around and walked away, and that party was over. But again, that didn't stop me. But now my drug abuse had gotten so bad, I had to keep up. And by the way, this was a miserable existence. Like my friend didn't even want me around his house anymore. So I started living under the famous bush under there's a Long John Silver's in Encinitas, California, and there's a big old bush in the front. That's where I would crash out at night. I have my little sleeping bag and stuff, and that's where I'd stay. And then I'd run out and go do my car hopping and stuff to fulfill my habit of miserable existence, absolute miserable existence. I eventually lost all my friends. Now, what I did gloss over, which I should dial back, is in junior high, I met Mrs. Nerdrotic. So we were dating during this period. We were dating on and off. She was part of the Rocky Horror Picture Show thing, but she broke up with me like 4 or 5 times. I was a very bad boyfriend. So the thing is, she would always break up with me, get another boyfriend, but then always cheat on that boyfriend with me. And it worked out for the best. I didn't have, for her, she didn't have to worry about a crazy boyfriend who lived under a bush. By the way, I showered every day. Okay. There was public showers. I was clean, but it still was a miserable existence. And we were dating on and off, and she was partying there too. But she never partied as hard as I did. And I don't think anybody did, to be honest with you. I was that one. They're like, oh, he's never going to make it. I was like most likely to die. And I thought I was too. So my criminal behavior got worse and worse. And the reason I'm completely okay with talking about it is I've talked about it 100 times in meetings and stuff. Plus, I've already paid my dues. I've already paid my price to society. So, through all this massive criminal behavior, which was breaking into cars, breaking into houses, I got busted like hard. So the first time I got arrested, I did a year in county jail. And that was, most of that was done in a fire camp. So if you get busted, you have the option, if you're nonviolent, to go train to become a firefighter and work for the CDF here in the state. So I did that. So I fought some fires when I was 19. This is all when I'm 19, by the way. And fought a bunch of fires and did that until I broke my tailbone on one of the fires, fucking around. Like I was walking down a mountain, and I decided to like just start being an idiot, and I slipped and fell on my ass and broke my ass. And that fucking hurt, by the way. And I won't even get into the details of what happens when you break your tailbone. It just makes a lot of natural human functions very difficult, very, very difficult and painful. And it's not a good memory. But I ended up going to like this really low security facility for the last month, and got a job and was prepared to go back out in society. So I did that, and I did okay for like 2 weeks. Then I went back to partying. At this point, my dad intervened and threw me in a rehab, and I went to the Betty Ford Center. I went to the Betty Ford Center, met some famous people who I've talked about before, had a good time, had a good 30 days, ate some good food. And it was during the time where spring break, back in the 80s and 90s, Palm Springs was it was like Florida. It was a spring break location. People just partied like mofos. So I got out and went partying. Got back. None of my friends really wanted to have much to do with me at that point. So I just like turned into like your typical, tweaker. I was basically a tweaker, homeless, robbing and stealing, kept doing that stuff, got busted again. And because I had a prior, and because I already did a year in county, this time I went to the big house. And this was on October 24th, 1991. I just turned 21. And I went to Folsom. For on a 4-year clip. Of course, I only did half of that, but I got sentenced to 4 years because I had priors for basically what's called a hot burglary. So one of the houses I bust into, I thought there wasn't anybody there, but there was somebody there. And I will tell you this because it's like the gods intervened on this one. So broke into this house. My friend was supposed to be watching outside. He bailed. And a little dog, by the way, little dogs, much worse than big dogs. Okay. Little dogs bark like crazy. Big dogs sometimes won't bark. So little dog starts barking like crazy. So I'm going to exit. I'm like, okay, this isn't happening. I'm leaving. Somebody's here. I go through the garage and I try to go out the side door, and the door handle comes off the door in my hand. This dude comes down. Apparently, he was on his Navy gunner team, or like he was like some kind of pistol expert. What did the cop said he could have shot me between the eyes at 300 yards, and he had a gun to my head. I could see the bullets in the chamber. So got lucky there. And the cop who took me in, was just saying, like, that guy, you're lucky that guy was, and he was scared. His hand was shaking. He's all, you're lucky you didn't get shot. So I went down for a long time and it sucked. So I did time in Old Folsom, not New Folsom, Old Folsom, because at the time the California prison system was going through what was called an illegal transition. What they were doing was illegal, but they did it anyway. So there's multiple levels with California prisons. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1 and 2 are non-violent. 3 and 4 violent, and that's why that's for people like who go to Pelican Bay and the hardcore like supermax prisons. So Old Folsom was a max prison. As a matter of fact, American Me was shot there like right before I got. They just finished shooting, and I arrived like a couple weeks later. Because that was the talk of the yard. So they were transitioning from a super max, violent criminals to non-violent, and moving them to New Folsom, which was built on the same property. So they had a bunch of level 4s with level 2s, and they just mixed them in. They thought that was a good idea. So when I get there, I mean, I was actually happy to get there because I had spent like 3 months in processing, and you couldn't smoke in processing. So I was just happy I could smoke a cigarette. And spent 3 months in processing at Donovan, went to Old Folsom, and my cellie was, I'll name this guy, was a guy named Jeff Healy. He murdered 2 people. Really nice, wonderful guy, wonderful human being. So yeah, the whole time, I don't want to spend too much time on the whole prison experience. So me and this guy didn't get along, and eventually it turned into a tussle that I surprisingly won. And it was over Pruno. So Pruno is like jailhouse alcohol that you can make with water, sugar, yeast, and oranges, and you hide it. And if you can have it ferment in between them searching your cell, you get yourself jail booze, get drunk. Yay. I never touched this stuff. So I never touched, after I got arrested, I didn't touch any drugs or anything in prison. And that's when I started really going to meetings. What planted the seed for recovery for me was going to Betty Ford, going to that planted the seed, taught me how to meet, taught me about AA, taught me about NA. And I started attending meetings in prison just to get out of my cell. But it started sinking in, and I went often. But me and this guy had this little spat. I did a little time in the hole. They pulled me out of the hole, and then they realized they shouldn't be mixing level 2s with level 4s. So after spending a year in max, they put me to a camp, basically. So I went to a camp, and it was a lot easier, but basically, just to sum up the prison experience, long periods of boredom interrupted by terror. Nothing ever really bad happened to me. I walked out of there without a scratch, got into a lot of fights, and because you have to. I wouldn't say a lot. I'd say 8 or 9. Won a couple, lost a lot. It's fine. As long as you show effort. they don't, you won't become a bitch or a punk, and that's what you don't want to be. You don't want to be a snitch, bitch, or a punk. And the best way to survive prison is to not mess with, forgive the non-PC terms here, but this was what a wise, by the way, prison, racially segregated, being a ward of the state, being property of the state is not fun and not anything I ever want to be again. My number was H20738. If anybody's wondering, I don't remember what cell block I was at, or what I was in, building 1 on Folsom, which you can, yeah, it's still there. And yeah, so it's survivable. And so a wise person told me right when I got there, because I was like a young buck with long blonde hair and blue eyes, and I'll never forget the first thing somebody said to me when I rolled up into Folsom. I rolled up and stood in this line, and some guy screams down, "Hey, Blondie, you want some of my sack lunch?" I'm like, "Oh, shit." Didn't have any sack lunches, though. Didn't need to do any of that because I stayed away from, by the way, again, apologies for the non-PC term here. Stayed away from gambling, drugs, and trannies. So this weird thing that they do there is there's there was dudes with boobs, and they would put them like 1 or 2 on the yard, and the urban legend that was told between prisoners was this was done on purpose to kind of keep the population at bay, because that tranny would service some of the population. Of course, they were not gay, because that's the way they rationalized it. But yeah, that kind of stuff went down. It's a very weird place to be, but you learn how to like eat meals in 3 minutes, have 3-minute showers. I've read a lot of fucking books. I read almost the entire Stephen King library. I read the most books of my life. Frank Miller's Dark Knight, the leather bound one where it's got Year One and Dark Knight Returns, and then it had the little Santa Claus special in there. I read that over and over again. Helped me get through it. My parents would send me care packages, so I'd listen to music, and I rolled my own cigarettes. I got really good at rolling. I could roll cigarettes with like one hand. So survived that, got out. When I got out, I had $200 in my pocket from the prison, and my parents picked me up, said I could live there for a year. Now, mind you, I've been going to meetings this whole time. When I got out, I swore I would never come back. I'm like, I am done with this shit. I am straightening out my life. I don't know how the hell I'm going to do it. But when I got out, I was worried, because I'm like, I have no skills. I'm 23. I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. And my parents said, you can live here for about a month. Well, luckily, my childhood friend, Doug, the official Dougie J, I will name him, got me a job at the Warehouse Records. And he can tell you stories about how fucked up I was. I was a fucked up, angry person. And it took a long time for me to transition from going, from addiction to prison to real life. But I managed. I went to meetings, got a sponsor, went to my job every day. And as I've told the story a million times, when I walked out of prison, I wish I could bottle that day and give it to everybody, because that day I needed nothing. I was just happy to exist. The world was beautiful. Everything was beautiful. My first meal was at Denny's. It was the best fucking meal I've ever had to this day. And it was a grand slam. So there I started working at the warehouse, made a bunch of new friends and started living a normal life. It was pretty cool. I went to meetings all the time. I met my first wife in a rehab, which is never a good place to go. And by the way, yeah, so my first wife was a nice person. The only thing we had in common was recovery. Outside of that, she didn't like. I was still really into comic books and films and stuff, and she really wasn't down with my comic book and toy collecting. She thought it was very irresponsible, very non-adult. But I mean, honestly, I am also a very difficult person to live with. I got a lot of fucking hangups. I got OCD, I got ADD, and I think I was just irritating the fuck out of her. But she just kind of rolled with it. But you know what it's like when you're around somebody and you know, like, I irritate this person. I irritate the shit out of this person. So after 7 years of marriage, which, I mean, it wasn't all terrible, but it was pretty bad. Uh, we split up, and this was right around the time when my dad died. So so the entire 90s, I got out in 93. I got out in December 7th of 1993. And pretty much the entire 90s after that, I was complete straight edge. Just, all I did was go to movies, buy comic books, work my job at the warehouse. I got a delivery job, delivering auto parts, and I was proud as hell. I made $10 an hour, and I got to drive the company car. And during these auto deliveries, I would stop at I knew where every Toys R Us was near my stops, and I would start collecting toys. Now, this is important. This started toy collecting and comic collecting, and this led to something eventually that you may or may not have heard of. But yeah, there was not a lot to report. It was a pretty mundane life, but I was never really happy. I always felt like I wanted something more, but I kept myself down. I didn't think I was capable of it. I didn't think I was smart enough. I didn't think I have the skills. I would never get the money. I would never amount to anything, which is a bullshit way to think, especially in sobriety. And I still obviously had a lot of work to do. So, my dad and I had a horrible relationship. But when I got out, me, my mom, and my dad and my sister kind of mended fences and got really close, and had I had a really good, I would go golfing with my dad. He was my golfing buddy. And, and another thing, something my dad and I always did prior to me going to prison and after, was we went to Charger games. He had Charger season tickets. So we always bonded over football. Even when we were hating each other, we would bond. We would like, you suck. But did you see what Dan Fouts did? I was like, that was our connection. So, of course, the Chargers, and it was great. When I got out of prison, the Chargers miraculously made it to the Super Bowl. Like, we never thought we'd see this. So I went to and watched the 49ers kick the shit out of the Chargers. But it was like the best time. Me and my dad went to Florida and went to Fort Lauderdale, went to the Super Bowl, had the best time. We didn't care if they lost. Who cares? They weren't even supposed to go anyway. That was so lucky how they beat the Steelers in the AFC Championship, but it was great. So we had a good relationship, got married. Life was good. I was putting together my life. I was leading a normal life for probably the first time in my life. And I saw that, like, it's possible. I'm like, it's possible. This is great. But there was something missing. Now, that something missing, spoilers, was I had more work to do in AA. And while I was still going to, 2 or 3 meetings a day back then, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes not enough if I'm not doing the right work. I was just kind of going through the motions towards the end. So my dad got cancer. Cancer hit my dad, and it was brutal. It was fucking brutal. Slow, horrible, painful death. And I had to watch it every day. So my mom had to go through that. Now, my mom was a caregiver for her sick father, and then a caregiver for her sick mother, and then a caregiver for my sick dad. So she spent all of like a decade and a half taking care of sick family members. And that completely fucked her brain. I mean, like, honestly, I don't mean to disrespect. I love my mom. She's not come back from that, unfortunately. So then the dad thing was horrible. And the worst part about it is it went into remission. Everything was great. And then it came back and like killed him in a month. And I was there with him. Me and my sister were kind of trading off dripping morphine onto his tongue. They had the home hospice. So he was just on a bed. A nurse was there to take care of him. He'd wake up and moan, and we'd dip some morphine on his tongue. And then one day he just died. And we were relieved at that point. It was so fucking terrible. and my marriage was breaking up at the time. So I kind of was reeling a little bit. And again, it's because I hadn't done enough work. But getting out of the marriage was the right thing to do. So after he passed away, I got divorced, and I'm like, I need a change. In the meantime, I had reconnected with Melissa. Melissa and I had always been friends for many, many years, but then we kind of lost touch with each other for a few years. And then she found me through classmates.com. So we started emailing, but it was just as buds. She was married to somebody else. I was married to somebody else. But then she got a divorce. I got a divorce. We started talking a lot more. And one day I'm like, we're like, let's move up to San Francisco. Fuck it. I like Melissa. I'm going to move up to San Francisco. So I just did it. It was impulsive. I did it. Glad I did. Moved up here. The whole plan was to find my own place while I lived with her. Well, that never happened. We just stayed together, and we ended up buying a house before we even got married. In that first year of San Francisco, I was shopping at a comic store, and I was working auto parts jobs. I had through the auto parts driving, I had learned how to turn wrenches, learn how to be a mechanic. I hated it. So I went into auto parts, and I sold auto parts, and I was completely happy at this job. I loved the job. It was great. It paid really good. The work wasn't really that hard. And it was somewhat social. So I like a social job. I liked it. No complaints. So I started shopping at the Comic Outpost on Ocean Avenue, and then I heard it was for sale. So I said, Melissa talked me into buying it. She's like, I wanted to have a comic store in retirement. She's like, no, you should buy it now. I'm like, okay, fuck it. So I had the money, and because so working my ass off and taking care of actually a government program helped me buy a condo in Escondido for dirt cheap. I bought a condo in Escondido for $35,000, like complete. And I ended up 2 years later, because of the housing boom back then, I sold it for $225,000. Now, of course, I had to split some of that. I didn't need to, but I did because I'm an idiot. I split it with my ex-wife, and I took the other money, and I had some money for the comic store and put it down for my house. So bought a house in San Francisco, bought a comic store. I hadn't even lived here for a year. And you may not have heard, but then I ran a comic store for 10 years, and the first 8 of it were great. Fantastic. It was fun. I got to meet tons of people, was going to Comic-Con. I had found my purpose in life. That's what the thing that was missing. The thing that my ex-wife hated, that I had to, by the way, you want to hear freaking pathetic. I used to have to hide my comics and my toys from my first wife. She saw them, she would freak out. And one day I realized, like, this is me. This is part of me. What the fuck am I hiding this shit for? Why am I being such a pussy? So, so bought the comic store. And by the way, I'm doing the very fast. This is the fast version. We're already 45 minutes in. Bought the comic store, ran it, didn't know what the fuck I was doing, read A Small Business for Dummies, talked to other, Brian Hibbs, Jamie Newbold, James Sim. There was a lot of people who helped me with the comic shop. Even the old owner, Russ Quadra, they were all really nice. They helped me, and I learned from them. Every time I traveled, and I've done this since the 90s, actually. Anytime I go to a different city, if there's a comic book shop there, I went there. And when I owned a comic shop, I would always steal all somebody's good ideas. I go in, talk to the owner, and if he had a good idea, fuck, I'm taking it. And that's how I learned on the job. And I think I made something pretty unique in San Francisco. All the San Francisco comic shops were always like either diamond newsstands or we are the edgy independent comic shop, which really works here. I mean, it absolutely is the smart thing to do here, but nobody had the normie men in tights, women in tights, 4-color, kid friendly comic shop. So that's what I did. I got no magic cards, no Yu-Gi-Oh cards. It was just toys and comics, because I didn't, nothing against those things. I just knew nothing about them. So no Warhammer 40K, no D&D. It was just comic books and toys, and it did great. I was able to, pay mortgage, pay bills. And, but I stopped going to meetings. I was going to meetings when I first got to San Francisco, but I felt disconnected. I had a really good home meeting down in San Diego. And, you know, I still have my sponsor, but this, around, my 4th or 5th year of owning the comic store, my sponsor committed suicide. So, yeah. So I didn't get another sponsor after that. I was completely, and he always told me that if, you know, so my sponsor had been to prison as well, and he had a fucked up life. And he always told me that if he went back out again, he would just end it. And he was true to his word. He went back out and he ended it. And that sent me reeling. Uh, I used as an excuse to lose faith in AA. I stopped, but I was not going to meetings anyway, and it wasn't a priority in my life anymore. And it needs to be. I stopped doing the steps. I stopped doing the work. I stopped going to meetings. Did not have a sponsor. And what happens after that? Well, um, relapse. Every single fucking time that'll happen is relapse. So I relapsed, and it's like, and I don't even want to get in the details of that because it would take way too much time. But I just found a way. I got offered a lot of free stuff at the comic store, and I decided to take up a drug. I had taken a lot of drugs, but during my drug time, I was doing shrooms, acid, uh, meth, pot, just everything except for coke. I think I had tried it once in the 80s, but I decided to pick up a major cocaine habit just overnight. And I'm talking, it was like but there was also, on top of that, I had gotten injured on the job. So I, when I got injured, I went to the emergency room. It was the dumbest injury. God damn, it was dumb. So I was hanging up a Superman Returns banner, which I still have. As a matter of fact, it's at my house as a reminder of how fucking stupid that was. But it's in my house. It's a giant vinyl Superman Returns banner. And I had a folding ladder, and because I had really high ceilings in the comic shop. So I had this giant ladder. The ladder folded on my thumb, crushed it flat. It was dude, I had broken bones. I'd broken my tailbone. The worst pain ever was flattening my thumb. Went to the emergency room. They put the little pin in the nail. The blood squirted out like fucking Monty Python. Then they handed me Vicodin. So I was already off to the races, and decided to take up something new as well. So that turned into a thing too. So I got hooked on on opiates and cocaine at the same time. And within 2 years, I had to sell my shop. I had snorted everything. I could just tell you story after story of shit I sold for drugs that would just break your heart, including, this one sucks, my John Byrne commission piece of Spider-Man and Batman on a double date with Catwoman and Black Cat. It's a beautiful piece. It's on my Twitter somewhere. Them on a roof eating a dinner. And we did that in trade. I got to talk to John Byrne, and I traded him a sideshow 1-in-1 thing head bust for that drawing. So through the comic store, I met a lot of people, met a lot of friends and stuff, but like went through this very public relapse. Like a lot of people got to see it. Like a lot of people got front row seats in the comic shop. My poor employees, I listen, people who were involved in my life when I was on these drug benders, I had a lot of amends to make. They had to go through a lot of shit. I victimized a lot of people. And it's not something I mean to gloss over. We are constrained by time, but I mean, I put a lot of people through the ringer, including my poor mother, my sister, my dad, my employees at the comic shop. Blame them for fucking everything. And, and listen, it was my fault. So I was going to shut down the comic shop. Brian came in and said, "Hey, why don't I buy it?" And he salvaged it. And that's why it's still there to this day. So at that point, of course I was married to Melissa, had the kids. I know I glossed over that, but again, and was living the good life. Then I relapsed, and Melissa told me to get the fuck out. So I got the fuck out. And that was after I sold the shop and had relapsed again. She had sent me to rehab, went to rehab, didn't really work. That's when I decided to sell the shop. Then I relapsed again. That's when she told me to get the fuck out. And I went to a sober living house here in San Francisco, which is actually the cheapest way to pay rent here. It's like $800 a bed. And started from scratch, had kind of nothing. Whatever money I had from selling the shop, I mean, it was just, I had nothing. And started over. And what was it? At that sober living house, that's when I started this podcast. So, on January 7th, when I started the podcast, I think I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 days sober, 10 days sober, and recommitted myself to AA. Through the sober living house actually worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but I was like ready to come back big time. Did 90 meetings in 90 days. I went through a couple sponsors. I got fired by a couple sponsors because they were really frustrated that I didn't pick up my phone all the time. It's one of my many flaws. But I did it. I slowly, I got a job. I went back to auto parts, went back to what I knew. And it wasn't fun. The 5 years wasn't fun. That's why I'm really glad I had this hobby of podcasting. And of course I did it to still have a connection to nerddom, because that's what I was going to miss the most out of the comic shop. I'm sure you've heard that story, that I really loved talking to the customers. That was my favorite part of the job. No customer irritated me. I would stay open an hour late for a customer. If a customer, I would open early for a customer. I would run home and get comics out of my collection while the customer is waiting and come back to make sure that they had a complete set of something. That's the kind of some people would call that over the top. I thought it was good customer service, and that's why, people like me. I won Best of the Bay in 2019. I guess I shouldn't gloss over that. Won Best of the Bay. So fucked all that up and started over again and working. I went, I would stay at a parts job for about a year, get sick of it, and jump to another one. But each time I was getting paid better. So once I was there for a year, I'd get disgruntled and say I need to make more money. They would say no. So I quit and go to another job that paid me more money. And that's where I learned that if you're not happy somewhere, fucking quit, especially if you got a skill and it's one that's needed. There isn't a lot of parts people around anymore. So I could ask for what I wanted. And what did Robert Meyer Burnett say? You're only as good as what you negotiate for. So what I would do is just negotiate. And if they wouldn't give me the money, I'd leave. So I 5 years, I had 5 jobs. One of the worst one was a German car shop here in San Francisco. The guys who worked there were complete tools. And yeah, just I couldn't take it. So I'm glad I left that one. And they fucked me over a little bit in pay, whatever. I was just happy to be gone. Ended up at Tesla. And and then after a year of that, I ended up here. And it's been a great life. Melissa, of course, took me back in. She kicked me out, went to the sober living environment, and it was like 6 months, 3 to 6 months. I can't remember. But I started, doing the work, doing what I needed to do, going to meetings, got a sponsor, got sponsees. What really helped was participating in meetings. So I started doing, I was a secretary. When I started going to meetings again, I wasn't happy. I wasn't feeling like I was doing enough. There felt like something missing. And that's when the sponsors there's things you do at meetings. They get a coffee maker, they get somebody to organize the seats, they get secretaries, they have a greeter at the door. So it's your commitments. So I took a commitment and I started coffee making again. And that really got me committed to that meeting. And I was going to be the best fucking coffee maker in the history of AA meetings. And that's how I had to approach it. It's like I needed to find a way to get connected back to AA because I knew that was the only place on the planet that was not going to judge me. The best thing about AA, I know I don't know what outsiders feel about it or what they think about it. It's not a cult. It's actually the best way to get sober. Rehabs are great and fine. The only way a rehab would truly work is there's behavioral modification places that you have to stay at like 6 months to a year. That works. It's hard. And that's for hardcore people who got out of prison, who are homeless and stuff. But that shit works. And I highly recommend it. 1 month rehabs. If you're okay with spending $20,000 on somebody being introduced to AA, well, it's $20,000 for your life. Maybe it is worth it. And that's how I got introduced. But it really took 20 years for it to sink in, like for me to truly understand it. And that's after previous to my relapse, I had 17 years sober and I didn't fully understand it. So relapsed again, but really committed myself. Like I like everything I did before. I'm not gonna repeat any mistakes. And this is what's called hitting your bottom. Like I was done. I knew if I went back out one more time, I'd be dead. I don't want to be dead. And I'm supposed to want to be sober for me, but what really kept me connected was my kids and my wife. And I'm like, I'm not going to let them down. My kids have already been let down enough. I'm not going to do it anymore. So became the best. And seriously, I was the best coffee maker at AA. There has been no better than me. And then I became secretary, and that really got me connected. And every week I had to find somebody to speak, which was a pain in the ass, but I managed to do it. And did it for 6 months, and that really got me grounded. Like I said, I went through a couple of sponsors, found a really, really good sponsor who I have to this day, who is a great man. And really, dude, did so much for my life. He's a doctor. He's a men's health physician. And he helped me in every aspect. And one of the aspects of sobriety that they don't talk about enough that I highly recommend is working out. When I stopped going to meetings, I stopped working out and I started getting the comic shop owner bod, which isn't very sexy. And before that, one of the things that kept me sane in prison, I probably should have brought this up, is I worked out all the time. I played racquetball. I lifted weights. I ran. I got in shape for the first time. And I came out of prison like lean and mean. So, and I kept that up. My mom got me a gym membership for Christmas, and I would go twice a day. I would go once in the morning, once at night, until I moved to San Francisco. And then I started dropping off of that, and still I stopped going to meetings. And for me, I'm not saying it works for everybody. It works for me. I have to be working out every day, and I have to go to a meeting. I go to like 2 a week now. I probably should go to more, but I go like 2 a week. And that's on average. Sometimes I'll go 3 in 1 week and 1 in the other, but that's the average. And I do it in the morning. I meet with my sponsor once every couple of weeks. And we're going good. I don't want to count anything before it happens, but on December 27th is my sobriety date, my new sobriety date. And it'll be 6 years, coming up soon, about a month, God willing. So, I didn't do anything extra that, early on in the first 3 years of this 6 years, I didn't say no to anything. I mean, I just say no once or twice, but not much. And I've been asked to speak a lot. Right now, I had sponsees for a while, and I don't have one right now. I need to find time to do that because it's very important, but I don't have one right now. So that's a problem we got to solve. But the importance of doing the work, it's very basic, but it's not. It's hard to get through the personal struggle of working the steps. And everybody talks about like what's the hardest step. I think the first one is, I honestly think the first one is for a lot of people, doing your inventories and stuff like that. See,
part of the thing that my sponsor does is I repeat the steps. Like once a year, I repeat the steps. I think that's very important. So whatever you don't hit in your personal inventory, you can hit the next time because you discover new things. But the first one, just coming to the realization and accepting it, it's tough. It's very tough. And then completely understanding that. So working the steps, calling your sponsor, going to meetings. And if you feel yourself slipping up, I got to use I statements. If I feel myself slipping up, then I need to go to more meetings. Sometimes I've gone to 2, 3 in a day. It's been a while since I did that, but it was important, and having the structure around you, having people who give a shit, helps a lot too. My sponsor, my wife, she's kind of like sponsor B, and it's great. My wife went to Al-Anon, which helps a lot. Al-Anon's pretty important for anybody who's in a relationship with that. So yeah. So life has been pretty fantastic. It's not perfect. I wouldn't change a thing. I like how Dave Chappelle put it. How did he put it? That if my life is like a cheap pool, basically. It's not like fantastic. It's good. It's good. And that's all it's ever going to get. One of my sponsors early on, the one who killed himself early on, said, like, if you're happy half the time, that's great. That's great. So I wouldn't change a thing. I've learned a lot. Part of my perspective, if you ever hear it in my reviews, that's why I have a hard time buying a lot of stuff with, I know I need to be more empathetic, but when I hear people being victims over just the littlest stuff, it's like, that's not really good for personal growth. Accepting personal responsibility is a huge thing in AA. It's not just like I accept responsibility. It's no, you got to accept responsibility. I have to accept responsibility and attempt to make amends. Now I have to do it for me. It's very selfish because the hardest thing I had to learn was AA comes before everything. Wife, kids, job, neurotic, my car, dogs. It comes before everything. That has to come first, because without that, I've got nothing. And sometimes I have the tendency to push sobriety down to priority 2 or 3. That's not good enough. That's a death for me. So, and considering where I've been, I don't want to go back to any of these places. I really don't. They sucked. I don't want to go back to that life because it sucked and it was miserable, but it did give me a lot of perspective. It's like, it's the life grading curve. Like any day you're not in prison is a pretty fucking good day. So, if something happens, like, I don't know, your team loses, your wallet gets stolen, you get a flat, you get in a car accident, something like that. Just remember, it's kind of like any day above ground is a good day. So I don't know how good I told that. My God, that was an hour. Sorry. I'm going to get to the chat a little bit here. I'm sure I've lost a ton of subscribers. Oh boy, we weren't supposed to do super chats. I fucking fucked up. All right, let's read a couple of those. I will donate these super chats to the Gratitude Center, which is a good place here in San Francisco on 7th and Irving. And it has meetings all day, every day. It's a really fun place. I love going to meetings. I'm going to do that again. I love secretary meetings on holidays when nobody else will do it. I love leading meetings for the wayward people who don't have, loved ones to hang out with on Christmas and stuff like that. I don't know. That's why I like doing it. But let's here. I'm going to go there, and then we're going to do the super chat square up after this. So, yeah, and this is also a self-doxing. I don't think I'm that extreme, but if, dude, the internet's weird. So if some asshole wants to dig in my past and find out that I've got, I'm a 2-time felon there. Now, I'm a 2-time felon in a 3-strike state. That's why it's funny when it's not funny when I got off of probation, when I got off of parole, my parole officer, for one, he always thought I was up to something. He never fucking believed me until the end. He's like, you're up to something. But then after I multiple clean tests and I reported on time and everything, he finally begrudgingly said, all right, you're doing pretty good. I like you now. Okay. So he starts out with going, I like you now. So listen to me, move from California. You need to get out of here. Because of the 3 strike. Even the parole officers thought the 3 strike law was fucking stupid, and it's fucking stupid. And I didn't want to get into like prison reform and stuff like that. Sure, it needs to happen. It was pretty shocking. You hear about it, but until you see it, there's an awful lot of black people in prison. It's disproportionate. And that's something that needs to be addressed someday. Very, very fucking soon. There's real racists in prison of all races. There's real, there's wannabe Nazis in prison. They have got little swastika tattoos because they're lifers and they don't give a fuck and they need to survive. It's sad, and there's a huge revolving door, but there are opportunities as much as there's people out there going, you're not rehabbing any of these people and stuff. Well, you can finish high school. At Folsom, there was a print class where you could learn how to print, like bindery and stuff. And there's stuff there. It's very much like socialism. You're a ward of the state. Your food is free. Your medical is free. Your TV is free. You get assigned a job. Or you can just sit on your ass and do nothing. And that's what most choose to do. Yeah, it's something I can go off on completely. But there's also, but you know what I didn't meet in there? An innocent person. That's what I didn't meet. I did my crime. I did my time. There was a lot of people in there who, I just didn't run across any innocent people. Personally. All right. So I'm trying to get to this. But there was one sad case that was in county jail. But also, I mean, it's drugs. Freaking drugs will do it every time. Every time. And if we don't get a handle on that would save a lot of tax dollars. What that handle is, I don't know. I'm trying to get over to the super chats here. Again, these are going to be donated to the Gratitude Center. So let's do these real quick. Okay. Wow. Okay. Geeky Candy. Thank you for sharing your story. People need to hear how it's possible to overcome the demons each day. And it is. It's the one thing, I don't know if I got this across, but it gets better. Each day gets better. When I started this almost 6 years ago, it wasn't great, but that's where the one day at a time comes in. You just got to grip and just go, I need to stay sober today. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow, day after, today. And that's where the meetings become important. But now I enjoy going to meetings. I love the social aspect of it, hearing other people's stories. I love hearing newcomers because it reminds me of how bad it can be. And, one of those newcomers, it's gonna sink in, and that's a life saved. AA saves tons of lives. Josiah Clinch for $5. Gary, please read my email from yesterday. We need help bad. There's been a kidnapping in my family. Get a hold of DC. Yeah, I'll read the email. Did you call the police? I don't know what help I can do on that one, but yeah, Josiah, I'll check it out. That's awful. Domestics are tough. John Early for $5. Hey, Nerdrotic, how are you? I have an addiction with food. I was just a toddler when my grandma died, and I ate a lot of food to drown my sorrows. I guess you treat it the same way. I mean, addiction's addiction. It doesn't matter what it's to. The drugs are the using drugs is just a symptom to the greater problem. It's not what drug you do, how much you do it. I mean, that's awful, but there's a deeper problem in there that you have to through work out. It doesn't, you're never going to get cured. I'm not going to get cured. There is no cure. I have to go in situations where people drink and stuff, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. You got to learn. See, that's where, you got to learn to adapt to life, because life will not adapt to you. Marlon Sebo for $2. Was the test car manual or automatic? Haha. It was manual. John Hamster, $20. Thank you very much. Again, this is being donated to the Gratitude Center. I will show you guys the donation. Actually, I'll do the donation today. AJ1218 for $10. Thank you for your story. I'm 6 months sober. Awesome. Congratulations. That is a huge, huge milestone right there. I fell into the bottle for a while after my girlfriend died. Oh, I'm sorry. And I was also dealing with some PTSD from my time in the military. Thank you for sharing. PTSD is real. Now, I didn't have any, listen, combat is like the worst thing a human being can go through, that and being R to the A to the P to the E to the E to the D to me, and survive. So I can't pretend to know what that's like. But I had, I guess, PTSD from prison for years. I couldn't sleep. I would, even when I was moving up to San Francisco, I would bolt up in the middle of the night because I'd have dreams that I was back in prison. Wake up in a cold sweat. It took me a long time. Now I sleep like a fucking baby. But I'm glad it helps a lot. I'm glad you're sober for 6 months, and keep it up one day at a time. Paul Bevins for $5. Thanks for sharing your story. I hope this stays on your channel. It's inspiring and helps a lot of people like myself keep the faith that I can stay sober. You can, Paul. You can. You got to do the work. You have the tools. They're all out there. It doesn't cost a thing. Doesn't cost a thing. But thank you, Paul. Unfortunately, I can't leave it on the channel. I can't. Will Gentry for £2. How long were you an addict for? From 1983 to 1983 to 1991, and then from 91 till I don't remember exactly when I relapsed, but it was 2011, 12. So yeah, so I was sober from like 1991 to 2011 or 12. Long time. Long fucking time. But then when I relapsed, it was about a year and a half. That's all it took, was a year and a half to completely, a year and a half, 2 years to completely destroy what I built up over 17 years. But the amount of time but yeah, first time I was an addict, I remember, Will, I started when I was 12. I started when I was 12. And I was a full-blown addict and alcoholic long before my 21st birthday. I got sober for the first time shortly after my 21st birthday. Felipe Abrigo for 10,000 Chilean dollars. Gary, are you really Gary, you're really a huge effing badass. I don't know about that. A talented and smart guy, even if you say you aren't. An awesome human being and successful man. My respects to you, sir. You are an inspiration. Please write a book. I don't know if I can write a book. I'm not very good at writing. Thank you, though. I'll tell the story, though. I don't mind telling the story to AA. And that was like, believe me, I didn't have any notes. I haven't told the story in like 6 months. I just went off the top of my head. It probably wasn't that linear. And I left a lot of stuff out, but I hope it helps somebody. And thank you. Thank you very much. The one thing that I really just am tired of lying about was the whole prison thing and the felonies. I'm tired of lying about it on applications, and I'm done with doing that. Because I mean, I don't like lying, and I mean, every job I had I passed every freaking background test because it happened so long ago. And apparently they only go back like a few years. Now, there was a time I was really worried. I would sweat it because I would lie on my application. And that's what my freaking parole officer told me to do. He told me to lie on the application. He says, yes, there's the box there. Honestly, but if a business does hire an ex-felon, you get a huge tax break if you do that. Business owners. So maybe if you hire one that's been sober for a long time, you don't want to listen. It's tough. You're hiring somebody who just got out of prison. I mean, like, what are they supposed to do? There's got to be something. There is programs and stuff. There's stuff out there. Yeah. It's a tough one, man. I don't have a solution for that. Robert Johnson for $10. Thank you for sharing. I hope this helps people that are listening with addiction issues. Recovery is difficult, but possible and worth it. Yes, it's the only thing that is possible is recovery. Sporking News podcast for $2. Always find me in every story. I hear the gratitude, bro. Thank you. I am very grateful. I am extremely grateful for every day. I am having so much fun right now. So, and that's thanks to sobriety. Thank you, Steve O, for $14.99. Again, all these, this will go to the Gratitude Center here in San Francisco. I will be making a PayPal donation after this live stream. I got to tally it up. Keep it up. What you're doing, keep up. What you're doing is working. LOL. Australian $40. Thank you, Peter Davison. I love Scotch. Donates $10. But you know what? You can love Scotch and not be an alcoholic. Not everybody's an alcoholic and addict. You don't have to feel bad for drinking once in a while. Don't. Every single day, not good. Not doing anything every single day except for breathing and eating. And the other thing. J Pat for Canadian $2. Stay strong, brother. And hail Mrs. Neurotic, right? Hail Mrs. Neurotic for sure. That poor woman. She has to live with me every day. Ember Cole for $2. I hope you are safe from the fires. Stay strong. I am surrounded by water. I don't know if I'm safe from the tsunami if our earthquake ever hits, but I am. I have water to the north, to the east, and to the west of me. And then I have a giant fault line to the south of me. Edda Eskridge for $10. You seem like such a nice guy. I know I wasn't. I'm glad you got your act together and got clean. I am the daughter of an alcoholic who died when I was 1. Oh, you did the right thing for your family. Thank you. Yes. God, that sucks. I'm sorry, Edda. You got to find, the thing that really helped me progress in my recovery is forgiveness. Forgiving myself for all the wrongs I have done and forgiving other people who have wronged me. That teacher I spoke of who abused me. I used to wake up and have fantasies about like different ways I'd kill that dude, flay his skin, like all kinds of stuff. But it was through work with my current sponsor that I forgave him and moved on. Because honestly, every time I feel victimized by somebody, that person wins every single time. But it's not even about winning. It's about getting to a deeper issue of moving on with life and looking at it as a moment in time. It doesn't define you. While it might define him, but I'm talking about myself here. That didn't define me. I was a kid. I was helpless. And I should not punish myself over and over again for that. And I don't. But part of it was letting it go. And letting it go was very hard to forgive him. Find a way to forgive him and not just say it, like actually do it. And that took 43 years of my life, 44 years of my life. Maticus Finch, 1820 for $5. You are one of my heroes, Gary. Thank you for this. You're welcome. I just wanted to help sober people. And also, I mean, let you know a little bit where I'm coming from, because I allude to this stuff a lot because I talk a lot. Your story inspires strength in myself. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Hyperion 9997 for 12 Canadian pesos. You're most welcome. And for anybody out there, who's, wondering about sobriety, I mean, I'm tough to get a hold of, but if you got a question, Gary@nerdrotic.com, shoot me an email. If anything, I can, it's very easy to find AA meetings in your area. The only place that's tough is like in rural areas and stuff, I know. But man, the one thing San Francisco's good in is AA, man. They got, there's meetings freaking everywhere because there's a lot of people who need help. Stay sober, stay awesome. SPDA 242 for 25 Swedish crowns. I will attempt to stay sober today. And you stay awesome. JJ for $5. Thank you for this. You're welcome. It took me a long time to do this, and I had to get it cleared with my sponsor. I wasn't entirely sure this was a good idea, but he said it was. We're all works in progress. Keep it up, says Jet Screamer. Right? For $2. Progress, not perfection. JPRPH1 for $4.99. Hail, Gary. Much love and blessings to you. Right back at you. Thank you. Holding out for a hero girl or a hero for £2. Did you ever pray to God and ask him for help? Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I did. That is part of the steps. So here, let's get this up here. Let's get up the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous real quick. So that is one that, okay, here they go. So that's a very good question right there. Okay. I'm not a religious person. And I was brought up, my parents were Lutheran. I was confirmed in the Lutheran church and baptized, but I mean, I never believed it much. I always believed in God, but I'm like, I don't know. It's not I just wasn't into it. I was just into other things, and spirituality was not something I thought about until I'm just going to sound really strange, but until I started dropping acid. And then I started thinking about spirituality. That's when I first started thinking about it. Now I started to understand what it means for me in AA. And it was the second go around. That was one of the biggest humps I had to get over. Was before I was an atheist, and I would just, my higher power would be some inanimate object. I'm not an atheist anymore. Agnostic-ish. And the universe is my God. I think there is an architect out there somewhere. I have a little vision in my head of what that is. And yes, I have prayed to it. Absolutely. But it's not, I'm not a super religious person, but I do not judge religious people. I think, if it works for you, that is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. Nobody should ever be judged for being a Christian or Muslim or any of that shit. I know it's really basic stuff, but goddamn, Christians are not treated very well in Hollywood right now. I find that despicable. Absolutely despicable. They are fair game for some reason. For past deeds. Again, it's like making up for past deeds. That doesn't help anything. For one, most of those people are dead and they're gone and it's in the past. How do we move forward? How do we move forward with that shit? Forgiveness. Cave Bear, thank you so much for being honest about your past. This is one of the most meaningful things I've heard on YouTube. Whoa. Going to lift again. All right, Cave Bear, thank you. Wow. That's amazing. The Caliphs, I'm going to mess this up, man. The Caliph I'm just going to call you the Caliph, my friend. Thanks for your story, Gary. Very inspiring. Good luck to you. Bless your resolve and your family. Keep up the good work. Thank you, my friend, for the £5. Again, this is being donated to the Gratitude Center, which is it's AA affiliated, but they do NA meetings there, Cocaine Anonymous meetings there. Yes, there's CA meetings. Cocaine Anonymous meetings are actually pretty funny. They are a different breed. Static for $20. Perfect timing, brother. This helps. Been in a tear the past few months. Haven't used since Monday. Back on the meeting since yesterday. Thank you. God bless. Good. The greatest thing about NA, Static, the greatest thing is you can go to a meeting, and this doesn't mean you should go back out, by the way. This is just an example. You can go to a meeting, go out, come back in, say, raise your hand as a newcomer, and nobody judges you. They welcome you, call you by your name, and they clap for you. And then you'll get surrounded by people who want to help you. I mean, AA as an organization is not perfect because it's filled with human beings, but it's pretty damn close, man. It's the one thing that hasn't been infected with politics or anything. And it's great. The dude, 1764 for $1.99. Here's a few bucks for the center. Thanks for sharing. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Low Key Jarlson for $5. Say my name. I volunteer at a recovery center and I learned people are just people. We all deserve compassion, even an addict and even a felon. Good work. That's right, Low Key. Thank you. Echo Watt for $2. That was a deep story, Gary. Thanks for that. Peace. You're welcome. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the support, everybody. Stargate 404 for $10. For those who struggle with food, Overeaters Anonymous is there. That's right. And there are a lot of meetings, and that's a real thing, and there's no shame in that at all. Listen, again, I mean, I've been some fabulous places, but every time I go to these fabulous, like when I was walking around Lucasville, I reminded myself that I've also, been so drunk I peed my pants. I mean, it's like you're good with the bad. OA works, and I've seen it work. Met people who go through it, the Triple Crown, NAAA, and OA. It's all connected. And there's no shame in going to that stuff, man. It's just your life. And especially if it gets to, insane levels where it's just absolutely derailing, like where you cannot do anything without these things, alcohol, booze, food, or anything. But the hardest thing is you need food. That is very difficult. So my heart goes out to you. Draxel 6 for $10. Thank you, Gary, for the story. Glad the Salvation Army saved your life. Abortion illegal in Cali back then. I don't think so. And that's why it existed. And AA saved your life again, sober 27 plus years. God bless, Gary. Awesome, Drackle. That 27 years is brilliant. Rob Collins for 50 New Zealand dollars. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill. Ooh, that's good. I like that one. Thanks for your amazing honesty, Gary. I'm still going through my own woke-related PG battles, and it really helps to hear some truth. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for I just dropped something. There it is. Thank you for your support. Do we still have the 12 steps up there? That's right. We're going to end with those. Love your motto, progress, not perfection. Thank you, Drackle 6. I mean, because that's me. I am always a work in progress. John Cleese described hang on a second. I'm getting a live stream. Graham Chapman. Like this, and this is how my sponsor described me. I was put together wrong at the factory. I really needed to go back and be put together differently. And instead I've just kind of worked on myself, and it's but like really mundane shit is hard for me still to this day. Showing up on time is something I have to work extra hard at, and it's not because I like blowing people off. I just have raging ADD, and I get sidetracked, and I'm way too optimistic on like how quickly I get my shit together. And it's like, yeah, and at the end it goes with my OCD, and these are things I got to work on every day. And I have a very understanding wife. Were you afraid of being sexually assaulted during your prison time? No. Here's the big misconception about prison. For one, I mean, I'm sure like your boy Zach, who's out there, Diversity in Comics, who's seen military combat, actually loaded like weapons and shit. I'm sure every time he watches a military film, he's like, nah. So anytime I see like a prison film or something that goes on, I'm the same way. I'm like, nope. So I did not have sex in prison. I was I guess I was voluntarily celibate for God, a long amount of time, man. Okay, can we talk about that? Can we talk about the 2.5 years of nothing? I mean, nothing. Shit. But no, the sex that happens in prison is 99.9% voluntary. I didn't see much. I think I saw one thing in a shower out of the corner of my eye, and I can't unsee it. I'd like to unsee it, but I saw it. But honestly, no, I didn't hear about, see, or anything about anybody being assaulted against their will. I'm sure it happens, but I was in there for 20 something months here. I'll give you the days here. I had it figured out at one point. So it was days between 10, 24, 1991 and 12, 7, 1993. It's like 1,300 days. Oh, no, that's not even that much. How could I forget this? I had this imprinted in my brain. 775 days. That's how long I was in prison. Now, I had also done a year in county jail. So you can add 360, 300 to that. So I've spent a grand total of probably 3 solid years of my life behind bars. Prime time, too. One time was 19, and the other one was between 22 and 23. In those 775 days, I did not see anybody assaulted or anything. No. So I think that stuff is blown way out of proportion, for lack of a better term. But nope, I did not participate. Yeah, I'm definitely straight. I'm definitely straight. No doubt about that. Big lesson in AA shop, worrying about yesterday's failures and problems. Work on making today and tomorrow better. Crackle 6 for $5. Yes. If you fuck something up, learn from it. God damn, I've learned so much from my fuck ups. God grant me I like this is my I have a necklace. That little necklace I wear is on the end of it is a pendant that has the Serenity Prayer written on it. God grant me the serenity. I don't need to read this. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I have been drug-free since 2005. Love your channel and your work. God bless you, sir. Christopher Behringer, thank you very much for the $20 that will go to the Gratitude Center. And thank you. Nigel Mayo for £1 with an extracted message. I'm sorry. Mikey Mack for $5. I'm 1 week sober today. I'm a musician. That is hard. It's going to be a challenge staying sober in this environment. Yes. And Ben Affleck, I know you're listening, buddy. I know. Quit Hollywood. Get out for a little while. Like maybe 5 years. I'm not joking. I'd like to see. I would have loved to have seen his Batman. I'm not a Ben Affleck hater. I want Ben Affleck's kids to see him grow old. And I think if he wants to do that, he needs to get the fuck out of Hollywood. Those people are not helping you. That town is not a good place to get sober, and it sucks. And I truly do feel like really bad for the guy. There's no way I could have stayed sober in Hollywood. I'd be dead. So for him to be able to get back on the wagon and stuff, that actually takes a ton of strength. So yeah, TMZ, fuck you for showing that picture. And yeah, I hope he gets sober. I really do. Yeah, for all those people who are empathetic out there, if you want to joke about it, that's fine. You could joke about anything, but the people who judge us, call us dystophobes, they're all fucking making fun of them and shit. Fuck them, man. That shows that they're just regular garden variety assholes just like me. So thank you. J. Lou for $5. What should Professor Jack call, you should read Professor Jack's book called God is a Symbol of Something True. Call was a psychedelic church pastor and taught philosophy for 20 years. That's interesting. I will check that out. That is really interesting. Adam Child for $9.99. Gary, thanks for your story. You're an amazing person. I just dropped 25 to join your Patreon. Well, thank you. I love your channel. Your Adam. Yes, I did see that. Welcome, Adam, by the way. I'm going to be doing a Patreon nooner prior to the Inquisition tonight. You're a special talent. If you need anything, let me know. I'm happy to help. You are welcome. Thank you. JLO Flicks for $5. Hey, Gary, thank you so much for sharing. I have no doubt that God is really proud of you and your efforts to recover and inspire others. You're a champ. You guys inspire me every day. You don't know how much you've helped me be sober every day. And this channel has been a gift. It's been an absolute gift. Some other people might not see it that way, but I'm having the time of my life. Hanging out with you guys. Live streaming is my favorite thing to do. I hope to someday do it daily. Not the near future, but maybe if I can afford a producer someday, we can do this thing daily and it could be like a morning show. Jeremy and I were texting each other the other day and he sent me a Howard Stern link and I went down the biggest Howard Stern rabbit hole. And it reminded me like when I was parts driving, remember I was telling that story, I was parts driving. I was listening to talk radio every day. I listened to Howard in the morning, looked forward to it every morning. I remember the whole lead up to Private Parts. And I mean, Howard was responsible for getting Jane's Addiction back together, one of my favorite all-time bands. Loved Howard, hate what Howard's turned into now. I think he's the worst kind of sellout. But Howard, I mean, had a lot to do with this. So yeah, it's weird. Life is weird. Life is weird. This thing happening, never expected it in a million years. Lil Trill for 20 Norwegian crowns and no comment. Thank you very much. Dark Apprentice for $5. As someone who's never dealt with true addiction, I want you to know that even I find it that inspiring. Thanks for sharing. You're welcome. And thanks for listening. Yeah, we will be back to the pop culture right after this. Trust me. So those of you, thanks for listening. Bit broke this month, still want to donate. Gary, your inspiration. We want only to move forward with hard work and progress. We can't always do that alone though. No, we can't. So thank you again. This is all going to be donated to the Gratitude Center because I was supposed to turn this stuff off before I started and I didn't. That's my bad. Roger Ebert in his book, Life Itself, said that going public with addictions and how to deal with them was not a good idea. He knew his ego could cause a relapse. Was Ebert getting what was Ebert getting at? Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I think it's a personal decision. I didn't know he was addicted to anything. But I think each individual has to judge that for himself. Did he go public? I don't even remember him doing that. If he did and he regretted it, that's too bad. That's too bad. I go public every day. I've been talking about it every day. So my personal choice in doing this is it's part of what I am. It's part of what defines me. You guys get to know where I'm coming from. And yeah, I've been doing this for years, and it's no secret anymore. Also, it really forces me to be honest about the felony things and stuff. If I ever have to look for a day job again someday, because I don't give a shit anymore. I'm not lying anymore. Lady Miss for $50. In my world, we are glad you are still in it. Everyone around me seems to be on a mental health drugs. Yes. To get them through the day. I have been on my own most of my life, and I am taking care of now a 92-year-old mom from 17 years old. To me, life is great. Yes, Lady Mist. And we have an epidemic in our country. We have a lot of people taking, and there's probably people in the chat, and it's not to judge what's going on. We got to get to the core of that. Some of these drugs help people, though. I mean, that's a fact. So it's an individual case. I can't make blanket judgments or anything about that stuff. George, and we're going to end here. George Orwell says, I can't imagine the courage it takes to watch Batwoman sober. Oh, man. Oh, man. This is also about keeping promises. This is a promise I made a long time ago and kind of went back on. I shouldn't do that. When you make promises online, you got to keep them. You really do. As long as it takes, it might take a long time, but you got to keep them. All right, folks, we're going to wrap this up. Yeah, this one's leaving the channel. This was Piano Dean for $5. I am 25 months sober now. Ooh, 2 years. Gary, I'm a musician. It's around all the time, but my sobriety means everything to me. Thanks for sharing. It does. It's got to come first. It really does. He knew his ego could cause a relapse. That's what does he mean by that? To get back to that action column, it can. That's actually a wise statement. I don't know what it's got to do with sharing your stuff out loud. That's got nothing to do with it. Roger Ebert had an ego anything. The reason I relapsed was because I started was my ego. Absolutely. I started thinking my shit didn't stink, and everything was happening right for me at the comic store, and life was rolling, and it was success. No, success is equally as dangerous of a time for an addict as misery. I would say in a lot of ways more dangerous, because sometimes when you're down in the dumps, you will tend to go to a meeting more. That's kind of like your go-to for some people. Now, death in the family and stuff, that's pretty serious too. But like success, you stop going to meetings, you start thinking you're fucking the shit. Listen, I'm not the shit. I need to go to meetings. I will believe me. If there is a way to fuck this thing up, I will find it. If I don't go to meetings, if I don't stay sober, I will find a way to fuck this up hard. Trust me. Hey, Gary, long time, first time. Proud of you. Love your show and keep up the good work. Much love and respect. Live long and prosper. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the $5. Please leave the video up as at least today for us who got here late, who can see it. If you need graphics, contact me Insta. Syndic, you know what? I do need some animations and maybe some music. So email me at GaryNerdrotic.com. I will unlist it. So if you're watching it now, you can keep watching it. But no, I can't leave it up. I can't do that. Algorithmic reasons. And plus thank you for all the kind feedback. I'm sure there's people who don't like the fact that I'm telling my story, and that's fine too. That's fine. But thank you for your time. Keep an eye on my Twitter in the next 24 hours. I got to tabulate these, and I will screenshot me donating it to within the next 24 hours. So this is out of my money, because I don't get this money for like a month. Over a month, but I didn't mean to turn on the super chats today. That was, I thought I did it, and I did not. I just didn't monetize it. So, I don't think it's really a great idea to monetize it. I'm not really proud of that, but thank you for all you did. I'll make sure your money goes to a good cause. So keep an eye on Twitter. Okay, so this took a really long time, so I'm gonna have to do the super chat square up. I'm sorry to push it off. It'll be on the Nerdrotic Nooner tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. because I got to work on a video and I got to prep for the show tonight. So I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody on Friday Night Tights. I mean, the show went like almost 5 hours. I had to let those poor people go. So again, thank you for your time, and everybody. Yeah, we can end with this. We'll end with this. The 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. Number 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him or her. Come on, let's made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. Number 7, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, made a list to all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made a direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when doing so would injure them or others. Number 10, continued to take a personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admitted that. Boy, do I suck at that. Woo, I'm bad at that. 11, sought, the 10's important though. 10 is important. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him or her, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Number 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Frickin' Bill W., man. Dr. Bob. Yeah. So that's it, folks. I will leave this up as unlisted. And Super Chat Square Up will be tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Oh, God, you guys are still doing this. Stephen Yarnell, thanks for sharing, Gary. Brilliant. A flex. You're welcome. Loquacious Primate. That was for $4.99. Stephen, thank you for $5. Loquacious Primate. Don't have anything profound to add here. Just wanted to say I'm so happy for your success in my world. And my world, at least, is better with you and your existence. And mine is with yours. I want you all to be well, be happy. Now back to battling some people and now thank you for your time. Now back to the culture war. Everybody have a great day. I'll see you tonight on the Inquisition. Bye-bye.